Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my December 2023 book haul. This is a pretty big book haul. I have 17 books on the book haul. I am not including what I get for the books I get for Christmas because I will be getting those books in after I have to film the video, and so I decided to go ahead and film it. So those will go into the January book haul. So the January book haul might be a little bit larger than normal, but for the December book haul, I have 17 books, which is already pretty big. I usually buy around 8 or to 11, somewhere in there. It's not. I don't usually go too much over, and I don't usually go too much under. 8 to 11, because that's about how many books I read per month. So that's an average normal book buying. But this month, I have 17 books. Why 17? Well, 7 of them were gifted to me by a publisher, and so that changed the way my schedule works. So I purchased 10 books this month, and the publisher sent me 7. And so I'll talk about the ones the publisher sent at the end, but those are science fiction fantasy, and I also bought my own science fiction and fantasy, and I bought some Star Trek novels. And I'll start off with the Star Trek novels and go on to the fantasy sci-fi stuff. So the first book I have is Star Trek Voyager, Incident at Arbrook by John Gregory Betancourt. This is the shortest book I bought this month. It is only just under 200 pages. This is one of those books that it'll take me like an hour or two to read. I'll just fly through it. The reason I purchased this book is I don't have any more Voyager books on my shelves, really, and I want to read more Voyager. It's my favorite series in Star Trek. I know that's, controversial, but it's my favorite series in Star Trek. So I wanted to give it a chance. And the premise looked intriguing. The reason I'm hesitant to buy any books that are the numbered pocket books numbers is because there's not much story going on. Everything's kind of self-contained. But I was like, you know what? I'll give one a chance, see if I'm in the mood. So this will be definitely one that I'll schedule it one month when I'm in the mood, and I'm like, I want just a quick Voyager story. The next Star Trek book I got was The Battle of Beta Z from the Next Generation series. This is set during the Dominion War, so that means it's set during the events of the DS9 show, which I believe is around the time of Star Trek Insurrection. So it doesn't count as one of the post-Nemesis books when they were all tying together, but I believe that this is close enough to that they were starting to get their footing, starting to figure out that they were going to do an overarching plot and plan for the series, and this sounds kind of like an epic book. This is 2 authors I've never read before. It's Charlotte Douglas and Susan Kearney. I think one of them was a stunt double for a long time, so I'm interested to see what they do with this book. And to have Deanna as an action hero will be interesting, because that's not usually the kind of role they have for her. The next book I have that I purchased was The Red King from the Star Trek Titan line by Andy Mangels and Michael A. Martin. And I believe the first book in this series, and maybe a couple of the books, were USA Today bestsellers, which for Star Trek is a really good deal. This book is the second book in the Titan line. I have the first book and like the fourth and fifth books, and I have just a weird smattering of Titan novels. But I had the first one, which I plan to read eventually, but I was like, you know what? I see the second book, I may as well get it. So my goal is to eventually be able to read through the Titan books, which I've heard are like, if you want like a TOS style story, but set in the Next Generation era, because, Voyager is about exploring, the Delta Quadrant and all that stuff, and DS9 is about the people on that station, the political drama. This is more of going to a world and having weirdness happen on that world. That's what this series apparently is pitched as, and so that's why I got this one. I also purchased a book by Dayton Ward, which is Armageddons Arrow from the Next Generation line. I love this cover. This is my favorite of the Trek covers I got this month. This book came out in 2015, which is a real sweet spot for Star Trek storytelling. Right in between some of my favorite Star Trek stories. I love the Next Generation novel Takedown that John Jackson Miller did, and I also love the trilogy that is a crossover trilogy, but it's really a Next Generation trilogy, the Prey trilogy that John Jackson Miller also did, and this is set right in between the two. So I'm like, hey, this is sandwiched in between some of my favorite stories, and so if this is really good, it'll be like a full buffet of great Star Trek storytelling during that era. So I'm really excited to read Armageddons Arrow. And again, the cover is just gorgeous. I believe it's Alan Dignan did the cover design, but the cover art is by Doug Drexler and Ali Rees. So I like that. The final Star Trek book, no more Star Trek after this, the final Star Trek book is the novelization of the Star Trek movie from 2009. And because it doesn't have a title, it's very frustrating because I just have to call it Star Trek 2009, which is what a lot of the movie people call it. This is written by Alan Dean Foster. A lot of Star Wars people know him and Star Trek people know him. And then it was the movie itself, the script was written by Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman. This is a movie that I enjoy. I don't love it, but I enjoy it. But, I'm willing to give more novelizations a chance. It's bugging me that it's not mass market because it doesn't fit with the other novelizations, but whatever. I'll be interested to see if I like this. I'm not a huge fan of Alan Dean Foster's work. Like, I've never really enjoyed his novels that I've read, but we'll see. Maybe this one will surprise me. So that's all my Star Trek. Got that out of the way. Now for a sci-fi novel, which is a novel I thought for a long time, I'm not going to read that, but apparently I did buy it eventually, and that is God Emperor of Dune by Frank Herbert. This is the 4th Dune novel. I have been reading through and loving the Dune books. I read the first Dune novel, which was amazing, and the second and third books, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, which I didn't love. And then I went back and decided to read some of the Kevin Anderson and Brian Herbert prequels. I read the Dune House trilogy, House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Carino, loved them. And then I read the Schools of Dune trilogy, which was Sisterhood of Dune and Mentats of Dune and Navigators of Dune, which was a terrific, amazing trilogy. That trilogy was fantastic. And so I'm getting in my Dune zone. I'm planning on rereading Dune right when the movie comes out. And I'm on a Dune kick right now this year in 2023. So in 2024, I was like, I'll give God Emperor a try. And everyone warns me this is the book that either breaks you or makes you keep going and loving Dune. And I'm like, I'm invested right now in the Dune universe between all those other books I've read. So I'll give it a try. And this one was actually pretty cheap at the bookstore used. So I was like, I'll try it. And it matches my other Dune copies that I have. So that's Dune. I also bought 2 books in the Dragon Prince series by Melanie Ron. I bought book 2, The Star Scroll, and I bought book 3, Sunrunner's Fire. Both of them have terrific Michael Whelan covers. Michael Whelan is not my favorite cover artist. That title is forever will be Daryl K. Sweet, and I think maybe Royo is probably my second favorite cover artist. But man, these are great cover arts. Especially, I love this one. This one I think is my favorite of the Dragon Prince series. And I have the first book in the Dragon Prince series, The Dragon Prince, also Michael Whelan cover. And I bought that, I think it was last month or the month before when I found it at the local used bookstore. And then I found these other books at a different bookstore, local used bookstore. And they match the covers, and they match the spines, and they finished the trilogy. And so I was like, I want to get those. It's from Daw, a publisher I don't read too much of, but I actually have a lot of their books that I just haven't gotten to yet. So now for some either chunkers or just prestige fantasy. This first one's a prestige fantasy, and this is Babel, an Arcane History by R.F. Kuang. I read R.F. Kuang's trilogy, The Poppy War, which was very different for me, very different storytelling style than I normally read. But I read it, and I enjoyed it. It doesn't rank up there as my all-time top favorites necessarily, but it's a solid trilogy. And I am willing to read books by people with different viewpoints, and I'm willing to read books by people from different cultures. So I decided, why don't I give Babel a chance? This is a #1 New York Times bestseller. So this book just, absolutely dominated. And her new book, Yellowface, just won the Goodreads Award for the fiction category. And so I'm hoping to enjoy this one. This book's, it's about, I think, 500 pages. And I as I mentioned, I said prestige fantasy. It's kind of like you have television that they consider prestige television. That's how I think this is meant to be viewed, as kind of like prestige fantasy. It's not the high fantasy stuff that you see in The Dragon Prince. It's not sword and sorcery and doing all that stuff. It has fantastical elements, but it's more prestige fiction. So I'll be interested to see if you've read this book or any of the other books I've talked about. Let me know in the comments section down below. Then something I don't normally purchase. is self-pub books. I don't really buy self-pub books often. It's just not my cup of tea. There's a lot of reasons I can get into that, but it's not something I buy a ton of. I probably have about a dozen self-pub books on my bookshelves, and I've enjoyed what I've read of them, but it's just not something that necessarily draws me as much. But occasionally I do it, especially if it's someone I know who's self-publishing the book. And I do know the author this time, and that is John A. Douglas with his new book, The Black Crown, his debut. It is a, big chunker of a book, about 600 pages. And boy, do I have notes for the design of the book. But I got it because of my friend John A. Douglas wrote the book, and it actually has a pretty nice cover. And I decided, I'll give it a chance eventually. Not something I have on my immediate TBR, but sometime in 2024, I'll try to get to it if I can. So I do like this cover. I think it's weird that the goblin is that shade of green, but I'm sure there's a story reason for it. So those are the 10 books that I bought. Now I have 7 books that were sent to me by a publisher. Now, I've been reviewing books by the publisher Bane for the last year or so. I've really enjoyed a lot of them. I have not enjoyed some of them. And I've been very honest about my reviews with them. And they're trying to work with authors. I know that Mike from Mike's Book Reviews is starting to get their books regularly, and a few other booktubers are starting to get their books regularly, and so I am now as well. And traditionally, they've sent me 1 or 2 books in the mail. Like they sent me Lord of Shattered Land, and they sent me the sequel and another one of the Monster Hunter books in October, or maybe it was November. So they sent me like 1 or 2 books a month. This time they sent me their entire December catalog. They have 7 books coming out, 3 mass markets, 1 trade paperback, 3 hardcovers, and they sent me all 7 of them. And so I have all 7 of them here, which I'll display and talk about. 2 of the 7 I've already read, and the others I either am interested in reading eventually, or maybe I'll get to them. I can't guarantee I'll get to all of these because I have a bunch of books I already have 200 books on my TBR on my shelves right now, and then I have a bunch of books I want to buy next year. So I have a lot to get to, but I will get to them eventually. So the first book I have is a mass market. It is Haunted by the Past, which is an urban fantasy novel by Simon R. Green, part of the Ishmael Jones series. I've never read this series or this author, but this was one of the books they sent. It's not too long. It's about 300 pages in mass market. It is one of a number, I think it's book 4 in the Ishmael Jones mystery series. I do like that on their mass markets they include this either genre or subgenre. That is really helpful. I wish all publishers did that on all their books, but anyway. So that's one of the books that they sent me. They also sent me Worlds Long Lost, edited by Christopher Rocchio and Sean C.W. Korsgaard. Sean I actually know through Twitter and through a few other things at Bane, so I know Sean pretty well. Christopher, everybody knows just about now because of the Sun Eater series that he's writing, and the newest Sun Eater book comes out next year with Bane. He's switching to them. And so I'm interested. This is a short story collection. I'm not a huge short story collection reader, but Sean knows I've been interested in getting into short stories as shorts on the channel potentially, which I intend to start in January. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll use these. So eventually I might get to this. So I'm actually intrigued by it. And there's some big heavy hitter names. Orson Scott Card, Les Johnson, DJ Butler, M.A. Rothman, Patrick Giles. I mean, there's a ton of big hitter names on here. Next is from what I understand, a standalone science fiction novel called Summer's End by John Van Stry. It being a standalone really gives me hope that I'll read this one because it doesn't mean I have to do research. Like with Haunted by the Past, I'll have to go back and read the others, I think. Maybe I could just pick this one up, but I'd probably want to go back and read the others. This one, it's a standalone as far as I see, or if it isn't a standalone, it's the first in a series, so I can easily go through it, and I do love this cover. I think this cover is gorgeous. But that's one thing that Bane does that a lot of publishers don't, is their covers. They're pretty nice covers, so I'm pretty impressed. And so Summer's End is a science fiction novel that they sent me. and I'm interested to get to this one. This is probably, of the three mass markets, this is the one I'm most excited to read. Then I have a trade paperback, their only trade paperback this month that they printed, which is Threading the Needle by Mona Lisa Foster. And you might see that book and hear that name and author and be like, wait a second, I've heard this before on my channel. I've done 2 videos on this. The publisher asked me to review the book, which first to interview the author, which I did, and then I also reviewed the book. And after I filmed the review and interviewed the author, the book came in with the package. And so I do have a physical copy now, which is really nice. This is a science fiction Western novel about a former assassin who is leaving that part of the profession behind. She's going to help a friend of hers. Again, I have the whole review. I have the whole interview on the YouTube channel. So just look up Threading the Needle, Jonathan Cohn. You'll find those videos, the interview and the review, both of which were really fun to do, both of those. Didn't love the book, but I'm sure some people will. So that's her first book from Bane. She wrote a trilogy outside of Bane and has done a bunch of short stories as well. And Mona Lisa Foster is a delight to talk to. All the Bane authors that I've met have been a delight to talk to. The next book I got from them is Timothy Zahn's Icarus Twin, which I was going to read this anyway, and I already have read it. As soon as this book came in, I finished the book I was reading, and I instantly picked this up because I was so excited to read this one. This is part of Timothy Zahn's Icarus saga. This is part of his big mystery box storytelling that he does with Bane. He did the first book with Bantam back in the 90s, so 25 years ago, and that was the Icarus Hunt, and then he did Icarus Plot last year, and then Icarus Twin this year, and we have 2 Icarus novels coming out next year that I'm excited about. I read this, the interview is up on the channel, and so just look up the Icarus Twin, Jonathan Cohn, and you'll find that review, but this is such a great book. Such an entertaining book, and so I have that, and it's such an interesting cover. I still think that this looks like BB-8 turned upside down. I will never not see it that way. Next, I have a book that is a hardcover, the first in a planned series by Richard Fox, which is called Light of the Veil, the Shattered Star Legacy. And I have been hounded to read this book for months. It is, if any Bane book, this is the one that I've been told, you gotta read this, Jonathan. You gotta read this one. So I plan to get to this one very soon. I won't promise when, but I have it planned. I have it planned to read. So I will get to this one very, very soon. So, but everyone says this is... Everyone who's read this, then I know who's read this. I won't say who, but everyone I know who's read this basically has said, this is the new Star Wars. This is if you're, the way they described it as, if you're disappointed in Star Wars books, you'll really love this. I'm not too disappointed in Star Wars books. I'm enjoying the Star Wars books. But I love Star Wars, so if you're telling me that this is a lot like Star Wars, hey, I'll enjoy that. So I'm really excited to get to this one. And it's blurbed by Kevin Anderson, I know. And there was someone else. Oh, Michael Stackpole also blurbed it. So, of course, great Star Wars science fiction authors. Then I have a book that is part of the Kane Riordan series called Protected Species by Charles E. Gannon. Never read anything by Charles E. Gannon, but I'm totally up to read this series. I believe this is book like 5 or 6. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So technically this is book 7, but there's also like an 8th book that's already been published. But anyway, this is one of the Kane Riordan series with just another gorgeous cover. And by the way, I didn't highlight enough these gorgeous covers. And I didn't mention this. I talked earlier in the video how my number 1 all-time cover artist is Daryl K. Sweet, and I would put in the number 2 spot Royo and maybe Michael Whalen, but someone who is right now killing it with their book covers is Dave Seeley. He does this series. He also does the Lord of Shattered Lands series. He's a good cover artist. I like him. And these other books are pretty good too. Bane is just, nobody competes with Bane when it comes to cover art, in my opinion. But that is the 7th and final book that they sent me, and the 17th book I got this month. So that is a ton of books that I got this month. Some of them I've already read, like this one and the Icarus Twin, but some of them I plan to read eventually or very soon in other cases. But a lot of science fiction, fantasy, Star Trek. No Star Wars books, but I have plenty of Star Wars books on my TBRs, on my shelves. Don't worry, Star Wars books are coming in the future. And there's new Star Wars books being published in January. So, I mean, Star Wars is not going away on the channel. But I got a lot of books here to read. I got a lot of reading to do to catch up because my bookshelves are gonna kill me, and I am not going to sell books because I will not sell my books. That is just something I will not do. So if you have read any of these books that I got in the month of December, let me know your thoughts on them down below. Have you read anything from Bane? Have you read any Star Trek books? Have you read any of the Dragon Prince series? Have you read self-published books this month that you're getting into? Have you read the Prestige Fantasy by R.F. Kuang? Let me know all those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.